me, you captivate me. Tell me now, you're the one I've been dreaming about for my whole life. Had you on my mind, oh, hear the sound of your voice in the crowd calling.
Hi everyone, how's it going? We'll get started in a second. Just let some more people hop in. Oh, South Africa, Cameroon, very cool. Thanks for joining us. And I'll give it one more minute. Alrighty, let's get started. It's already 6:03. Hi everyone, my name is Raquel Livingston and I'm part of the Mentor Me Collective team. Today I'll be the MC for today's Workshop Wednesday. And we have a really cool workshop coming up. We're continuing our June theme, Social Surge. And today we're focusing on how technology and data can contribute to personal and professional growth. So as you're settling in, please drop a sparkle emoji or any kind of message so we know that you're here and excited to hear our wonderful speaker talk today. And for those of you new to the collective, we're a community dedicated to empowering individuals, especially first-gen techies, with the knowledge, skills, and tools they need to succeed in their tech careers, while also highlighting the positive impact technology can have on our lives and communities. Just in case you don't know who we are. Thanks for joining us if it's your first time. Okay, cool. We got some people from Nigeria, very exciting. Ghana. Awesome. So now we've done a little bit of intros. Let's just dive in. So today we're diving into the topic, the growth mindset and experimentation, driving business growth with data. We'll be exploring how embracing a growth mindset combined with a data-driven approach to experimentation can unlock significant opportunities for business expansion and innovation. So now let me introduce our exceptional speaker, Lendora Alston. Lendora is a senior manager of growth marketing with extensive experience in driving growth and innovation through data-backed decisions. So let me bring her up to the stage and get started. Hey, Lendora.
Hi, Raquel. Hi, everyone.
So before we dive in, we'll do some icebreakers. So I have a question for you. If driving business growth with data was a superpower, what kind of superpower would it be and why?
That's a really fun question. I would say that it is similar to the power that Rogue has in X-Men. And I guess I'm giving away a little bit of I'm a superhero nerd. Because there's also some other superheroes that have power. But I think of it as being able to siphon the talent and powers around you and be able to use them. Now, I don't know if Rogue could actually use them, but that's what I would add to it, which is that you can actually use those talents and what you're getting from everyone else and apply it.
Nice. That's a really cool answer. Thanks for answering. So in the chat, if you guys have any ideas, what's a new skill that you guys have picked up recently or are working on? Maybe not a superpower, but a skill. You can drop it in the chat.
I mean, it could be both.
I wish I could pick up a superpower. Rogue, that's awesome. That's a good answer to that question. I was like thinking about it. I was like, I don't even know how I would answer that question.
But yeah, it's the first thing that came to me. I'm like, how do I?
And that's why you're hosting the workshop. Awesome. Ooh, cloud engineering. That is a great skill. That's awesome. Networking. That's also a great skill. Feel free to network in the chat as well. Meet some people. And our community is a great place to network. I am also a great skill. Cool. Thank you guys for sharing. So I will not take any more time away from your presentation. I'll pass it over to you, Lendora, to kick us off. And chat, please feel free to drop any questions you have. We'll have a Q&A afterwards. So if you have any questions during it, we'll probably answer after, and then we'll have extra time as you gather your thoughts to do Q&A later. So you can go ahead and take it away, Lendora.
Awesome. Thanks, Raquel. Hi, everyone. I'm Lendora Alston, as I said, and I'm excited to be here with Mentor Me Collective. So thank you for spending the evening with me. We're going to talk about how adopting a growth mindset and expanding on that by running small or large experiments at scale, even without a big budget, can help you drive real results in business. And what's really exciting about driving real results in business is that not only does that add to business impact, but it also adds to your personal development and your resume. I know that a number of you probably heard how you show impact. And when you run experiments, at the very end, you usually have some statistics around what impact you drove, which is one of my favorite things to have, which is that documentation. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Just as an overview of what we're going to cover today, whether you're in marketing, product ops, engineering, or just trying to prove an idea at your job, my hope is that there's something here for you. And I'll break things down with real examples, including some from my own experience. I am currently a senior growth marketer. I have around 15 years of experience helping mission-driven and tech companies grow through experimentation, data, and strategic campaigns. And I've worked across early stage startups, scale-ups, and more mature tech companies, mostly in the education and maybe workforce space, though some experience in healthcare as well. And I love using data to make smarter decisions. And I'm especially passionate about sharing what I've learned. So again, hopefully this is helpful for you, or you have a nugget that you can take away. So I love opportunities like this because I enjoy sharing what I've learned, giving back, especially to first-gen folks navigating tech. So again, thank you for being here and also creating space for this conversation. So we will dive in. So here's where we're headed tonight. Essentially, we'll start with what a growth mindset really is, what it means in a professional context. Then we'll explore how to run business experiments, even if you're the only one on your team doing it, or if you're not part of the official experimentation or growth team. There's still opportunity to run your own experiments usually in your work, especially in marketing. We'll talk about how to use data to make decisions, how to design a simple experiment, and I'll give you practical tools and takeaways. So does that sound good? I know I can't hear you, but I can see in the chat that it seems like you're all with me. So we'll go ahead and we'll jump in. Okay, so first, understanding what is a growth mindset. So Carol Dweck introduced this idea of a growth mindset, and essentially it's the belief that skills and intelligence can be developed through effort and feedback. So a fixed mindset is more focused on the skills you have, but not being able to grow skills or learn or iterate. So growth mindset is often contrasted with a fixed mindset, which assumes your abilities are set in stone. So in the workplace, this shows up when people are afraid to try new things or they fear being wrong. But a growth mindset, in a culture with a growth mindset, we ask questions like, how can we learn from this? Will we learn from what we're doing? Can we iterate? A number of organizations have this as part of their culture. You can see that in the way that they articulate their mission or the culture and the work that they do. I've been fortunate enough to be part of companies that are in a growth phase, whether they're a startup or scaling up or mature. They are trying to start a new product or start a new business line. And so it's really easy, I say, to have a growth mindset when all of the answers aren't clear. It does make for hard work because no one really knows what the right answer is, but everyone's trying to figure it out. And so that helps facilitate a culture of growth. So why this mindset matters in business is because here's the thing. When businesses don't grow unless the people that work there do. So teams with a growth mindset and culture see failure as part of the process. So instead of being afraid to fail or always presenting yourself as someone who has the right answer without testing it or knowing what to do, it's okay to say, I don't know, but we can test it. I don't know, but I have this hypothesis and I think this might be the answer, but we can test to see if that's the case. So in a culture, this is important in businesses because then you have the permission to try new ideas, measure what works, and not take it personally when something fails. And this can be really important because people are afraid to try and fail if they feel that their job is on the line or their promotion's on the line or all of those things. But businesses really grow when there's a lot of learning or iteration. So failing is just an input, and the goal is to fail fast, really understand why you failed and then understand next steps. But not failing, I would just say that failure is a part of learning, and it's almost impossible to learn without failing in some way or capacity. Later, this is going to come back around when I ask you all about how many, when people experiment and businesses are running experiments, how many experiments do you think, or what percentage do you think are winning experiments? I'll give you some time. I'll come back to it. It'll be a callback, but think about that. If a business is running a number of experiments, what percentage do you think are the big wins, the ones that scale, the ones that drive a bunch of revenue? What percentage do you think that is? And I'll give you the answer later. But again, knowing how to fail but learn from it and fail fast, it creates a psychologically safe space where innovation can actually happen in a business. One way I've seen companies do this that I've been a part of is regular hackathons, but extending this to the full workforce. So if you're familiar with the hackathon, it's usually a code-based fest, a hack day, hackfest, datathon, code fest. And it's a marathon event where people engage in rapid and collaborative engineering over a short period, maybe 24 to 48 hours. And so I've worked at organizations where they've extended this to everyone. So marketing, creatives, design, everyone, and you get 48 hours to test an idea that you've had and pick people to be part of your team. And you can pitch the entire organization around an idea that you have, a hypothesis that you have, and then people of all different departments can volunteer to help you make that idea. Either test it, see if this works, or see that it doesn't work. And you'll know that, but you'll have that input. And so I've seen things like creating an entirely new microsite or creating a tool to help, a AI-backed tool to help people proofread a copy quickly that can be used internally. So these are just ways that people have a hypothesis or ideas that can help with resources or help with marketing or help with any facet of the company. And that helps build the culture of learning, iterating, failing, and not being afraid to test your ideas. And one of my favorite quotes from Carol Dweck around having a growth mindset is, I don't mind losing as long as I see improvement or I feel I've done as well as I possibly could. And so growth mindset isn't limited to just growth marketing or growth in business. It's a mindset you can have just personally. And it's a book I recommend. I do have these resources at the end of my presentation, but the book I recommend is by Carol Dweck. It's called Mindset, and Mindset, the New Psychology of Success. So growth mindset can be applied anywhere, but today we're going to focus on in a professional environment, of course. So a growth mindset fuels growth experimentation. So experimentation sounds fancy, but it's really just structured learning. So instead of guessing and leaving it at a guess and not being sure whether or not that guess was correct, you create a hypothesis, you run a test, and you measure the result. You see this in marketing with A/B tests or piloting product features that are new. And I would say that's more of a pre-post test. So see what happened before you launched it, see what the data looks like after you launched it. And that could give you a better understanding of whether or not that was a good change or not. You could do surveys. So that could be HR level surveys, customer surveys, and that could allow you to learn. So one of my roles involved testing different landing pages with just small incremental changes, like a headline or an image swap or a video explaining more about the product that we were offering. And then watching whether or not conversions rise. So the people, for that, we were tracking leads. So how many leads came through this page? So with the additional content or additional content or changing our call to action or changing the form or adding a video, did that make people more likely to submit a form or less likely to submit a form? And how I determined success of that experiment was, again, did we get more form submissions based upon the changes that we made? For that particular one, which I'll talk about. How do you assess when there is an opportunity? One of the things with looking at the data was seeing that people were leaving the landing pages pretty quickly, or bounce rate. And so the hypothesis came from that people were leaving and not filling out the form. So were they not getting something on this page? And could we increase the rate at which people fill out a form to request more information about our product or schedule a consultation? And so that's what experimentation is. Again, it is having an idea, creating a hypothesis around it, and then running a test, and then determining what happened, what was the result. And that's growth experimentation in a nutshell. I started out as more of a full stack marketer before I got into growth marketing. But one of the things I really like about it is being able to see your results. And I'm not sure what fields you all are in, but I'm a very data-driven person. So being able to see the impact of my work, or knowing that it was not for nothing, or that I could articulate what I'd done, especially to my manager, or just to myself, to know how I was improving on what I was learning, was really important to me. So I try to bake experimentation into everything I do, professionally and personally. And so again, growth and experimentation is really just learning, but structured learning, and then measuring the impact of those changes. So some example of business experiments. I'll give you a few examples. At a former role, we tested whether changing book a demo to schedule now increased clicks, and it did. What's important about this is that if you've worked with any level of leadership, you might have experienced where a lot of people have ideas. So there are a lot of ideas, more ideas than there is actually ability to test them. But if an idea gets steam, it's important to be able to test and not just subjectively change things for someone's opinion. So a lot of times what might happen in the room is the person with the most seniority, everyone will just agree with. So if someone with high seniority says that we should change this call to action button on the website to see it in action, people tend to defer to that person without knowing whether or not that's a good business change. And so what experimentation allows you to do is say, that sounds like a good idea. Let's actually test it. We will do it, but we'll also measure the impact. So we're not making a change just based upon subjective opinions when it could hurt the bottom line of the business or not drive the results we think it's going to drive. Another experiment that I've done is where a team tested bundling product and services and then adjusting the price, so a discount. And this, again, was to see, again, the ticket price for the customer would be higher. But if you're bundling like services, the average purchase value might be higher as well. And they might not purchase things more standalone. So the hypothesis was around, even if we bundle services and they cost more than the standalone, people are more likely to buy the bundle. One, because they don't have to think through what services go well together. And then two, they are getting a discount. So they're more likely to buy it on now than wait, because they wouldn't get that discount later. And so again, that proved to be a good idea. And these are low risk tests that can help prove out an idea even when resources are tight. And so again, business examples is important to test, because if you go based upon assumptions or just taking the idea of the most senior person in the room, that can hurt the business bottom line in the long run, because that might not be what actually drives impact for that business. So here are some lessons from me from the field. And remember, I asked you to think about how many experiments out of a business are usually successful. That percentage, I'm going to come back to that if you see the question at the bottom of the slide. But first, I'll give you my experience. So one time we ran a quick A/B image test on meta ads. I'd worked in a marketing agency at this time. And so as part of that, we built full marketing campaigns across various channels, including meta and meta ads. And so when working with clients, they may have ideas or strategy ideas that may or may not improve their purchases down the line. And one of the ideas was whether or not changing the creative on the meta ad would increase the click-through rate and then subsequently the conversion rate. So whether or not we get more leads at that time. And so what they thought was that if, and what we came out with was maybe having more imagery around what their target demographic was. So it was more women at the time, and having them in place in the images would perform better than these were images around just objects. So around the product itself, with no one in it, no humans in it, which one would perform better? And so we had a low performing ad, which just showed the product itself. So really centered the product, but didn't have any humans in it, anyone using the product. And this is what the client wanted. But the hypothesis was that if we showed more people and we didn't center the product, that people would see themselves using the product, be more engaged with the ad. And we just know from data that we had on social from other clients that typically ads with people in it get more engagement. And so we ran an A/B experiment, not only to prove out the theory that we had and to confirm the data that we had, but it's also really helpful when you're trying to convince someone of a strategy choice. So the client, we work for them really. And so if they do want to make a change, ultimately we would probably make that change, but it helps when you want the client to be successful. You want to get them on your side about a decision and a change, and you ultimately have some other data that tells you that that's not the right path to take, but you want it to be a fair decision. You can let the data speak for you. And so for this, we ran an A/B imagery test within tools within Meta. And after we ran that test for around 4 weeks, we saw that there was a 23% higher click rate and the ads with the humans in it. And so that validated what we advised them, but also stopped our client from making a decision that would ultimately negatively impact the performance of those ads and the business. Because as you all may know, ads are paid for. So you're wasting budget if you're still paying for them, if they're being impressed and people are seeing them and they're on Meta, even if no one's clicking them. So it's everyone's benefit that we have ads that are being engaged with and actually driving performance and purchases. Another time for a fail, because not all experiments are going to be wins that scale. A fail that I had at another business was that we wanted to test out launching a new pricing model, a new product and a new pricing model with self-pay. So for this particular healthcare business, customers could pay with government funds, and they could pay through different sorts of funding like Medicaid. But it really depended on whether or not they had that funding available. So it's very specific to this business. But one of the things that we wanted to test was who was willing to pay a private pay model. And if there would be sticker shock if they were to pay out of pocket versus paying with their insurance or other government funds. So we ran what's called a painted door test, where we, you can think of it like a pre-order, basically. So we didn't actually have the full resources and the full checkout function to buy this privately and pay us privately. The business model was built around being paid through government funds, but we wanted to see if it made sense to actually build all of that out if people were going to be willing to pay privately. And so we ran a test where it created a landing page. I created branding around the product. I created ads around it, and really driving people to this product almost as a pre-order to see if they would be willing to pay for it themselves. Once they got it, they were interested in the service itself, but we could see at a certain point that they were not interested in paying this large of a price by themselves. So in a sense, we weren't able to launch a new pricing model or launch a new product where they could pay for it privately. And so that was a failure because it wasn't a new product that we rolled out, but it was a win because we learned that we shouldn't put all the resources behind this different payment model because there's just not an audience for this, or it's likely not going to be successful. So in that way, it was a failure in that it didn't work. We didn't launch this product, but a win in that we didn't, especially for it was a smaller stage startup, use a lot of resources to build out a robust system for a product that wasn't going to be successful. So now we're here. I want to know if you can guess the average win rate across experiment programs. So by win rate, I mean out of 100% of experiments, how many are usually successful and that they find that this change worked, it was great, we've made tens of thousands of dollars, it was super successful. Out of 100 experiments for a company, what's the going or average percentage that are successful? And I'm going to spoil it in about 10 seconds. So I'll give you 10 seconds to think about it. But I think the stat is really important to know as you think about having a growth mindset and leaning into experimentation. I see 10%. 10%. These are good wild guesses. 70%. That's a really optimistic percentage. I love that. 8%. Yes, we want it to be all wins. I wish it was 100% because then we'd all be great. We'd just be iterating and innovating every second. Let's see, 20%, 35%. These are great guesses. So, according to Optimizely, which is a very common testing tool, which I'll talk a little bit more about it when I give recommendations on tools you can use, but enterprise level, it is between 11 and 12%. So whoever guessed 10% is the closest. I wish I had a prize for you, but you can just take the feeling of being right with you. But yeah, so common failures for experiments include statistically significant, and I'll go over what that is, but negative outcomes. So not only are they failures in that they don't move the needle, but the change you're making actually has a negative impact. And either it's negative, inconclusive results, which has happened to me more than I'd like to say, and then flawed test designs. So when you think about what I said about having a growth mindset and being okay with failure, you really have to be. And this is across industries. So Optimizely is used across industries, and it's one of the consumer-facing tools. So it's really B2B, and a lot of different businesses use it. And when they aggregate the use of their tool where you can run A/B experiments, it selects the winner for these experiments. So basically, they're seeing across industries, across businesses, around 12% are successful. And so again, businesses are learning, they're changing things, but not everything's a win. Usually the goal is you're learning, you're building a roadmap, you're testing fast, you're failing fast, and eventually one of those experiments is going to be the winner. It's the one that you can scale, the one that will unlock growth. Okay, so before we get into more experiment design, and I'll talk a little bit about running experiments until it's statistically significant, some ways you can avoid a flawed test design, and then how I've gotten null experiments. And usually that's through like sample size or how long you're running a test. I just wanted to put this here. I just want to just encourage you to not wait for perfect data. Sometimes you have a hunch or hypothesis, something you feel in your gut, and that's valid. Use that to form a hypothesis and then test and see. Sometimes you can validate some biases or maybe you're not changing enough things, or maybe you've iterated on this thing 20 times and it's time to scrap it and try something completely new, even if it won't be positive at the beginning. And my example of that is a website. So sometimes you have to get your website to parity with what people are used to using, and make UX updates. But I don't think I've run an redesign of a website where there wasn't some tragically negative metric and then we're all scrambling trying to iterate and fix it. And I'll give you some examples of that. But when you pair instinct with a little data, you can move quickly without getting stuck in analysis paralysis, which is very common for me, honestly, because I like to have a lot of data, but you won't always have the full picture. As we talked about, a lot of things are new, businesses are growing, a lot of the challenges with businesses they've just been invented. These problems have just been invented. So the solutions have to be invented as well. Yes. And so Mason, I see your question here. Should we fail fast to optimize success? Yes. And when I get to the test design, how you fail fast is usually built into the experiment design itself. So if you are, before you're launching the test, you select what metric you're going to decision on, what you're going to look to see, what changes you're going to look to see. When that reaches statistical significance, you have to be willing to, some call it the brick glass metric, if it's negative, but you have to be willing to say, we got to this metric, and it was statistically significant. So we're ready to end this test and then go back to do a postmortem and see what else we should do. A lot of times I've found that it's helpful to have a roadmap, which is, this is what we want to test, and this is what we want to test, and this is what we want to test. So there's always a parking lot in my experience. There's always something else you want to test in that very space next. I just want to show you here, that's where the growth is, your instinct and data. Again, don't wait for perfect data. I've actually never found perfect data. If you have, reach out to me, please, because I need to know where it is. There's always, depending on what kind of company you're in, you could have a company with centralized data. And I've been in those environments where not everyone has access to the data. So you couldn't go into a tool like Looker or Google Analytics or Amplitude, or just a data that has customer data. You might not have access to that, and you're really operating off reports that's shared more broadly with the team. And so that helps in some ways, and that everyone has the same data. So maybe you're decisioning off the same data, but it doesn't allow you to manipulate the data in a way that answers some questions that you might have after looking at the data. For instance, you might see in a funnel report that people are dropping off between scheduling a consultation and then showing up for the consultation. And if you had access to that tool, you might be able to dig down, you might be able to look at website behavior. So you might be able to look at that yourself. And some companies just don't have tools that allow you to do that, or everyone doesn't have access to the data. On the flip side of not having perfect data, you can work in an organization or business that has decentralized data, which I have been a part of as well, where everyone has access to tools that pull directly from the data warehouse. But depending on how people filter and build their reports, it could tell a different story. So someone may be looking at web traffic over time, and they're looking at it globally. And then you're looking at the same data, but you filter by first-time visitor and only in North America. And so those two sets of data, reports on the same data warehouse, but the reports are built by different people, building in a different way, pulling up different events to get there, can lead to some discrepancies. So there are ways that you validate that between you and your colleagues to say, what I've done is say, this is what I see, this is the report I'm using, and they have a report, and this is what they see, and then try to come together to make some trends and then build a hypothesis from there. But again, I have not been in a situation where I have perfect data, no matter how data is managed within that business. So you can just let it guide you. There are two, I would like to say, buckets of data, which I'll go through, but data isn't just about dashboards, it's about feedback. So quantitative data like traffic or conversion rates shows behavior, and qualitative data like customer surveys tell you the why. So in real life, you often won't have a full picture. And again, that's okay. Just look for patterns that are directionally correct and use that to guide your next step. So in marketing, we often talk about a North Star metric, then the one number that best reflects the value that we're driving or that we're trying to drive for the business or that our team is driving. For example, in a direct to consumer business, it might be purchases or daily active users if it's a subscription model business that is built on users or usage. In a B2B business, it might be demo requests or marketing qualified leads or sales qualified leads. And in a software as a service company, it could be product usage or a trial to pay conversion. So having one primary metric keeps your team focused, especially when you're running lots of experiments. Because again, this will help you fail fast later, because what often happens, to me at least, when we're running experiments is that it won't only move one metric. So you can change something about the landing page or a checkout experience, and it'll move a number of metrics. But what might happen is that some metrics are positive and then some metrics are negative. And then there'll be a conversation around, well, should we roll this out because it did help XYZ metric, even though this went down? And if you set a primary metric, you've all agreed before you launch the test that this was going to be the deciding factor as to whether or not it's a win or a fail. And then usually within that conversation, you also have if it is a fail, this is what we'll do. And if this is a win, this is what we'll do. And that's how you continue to iterate and have that culture of learning. And so some monitoring tools that help with this to help get either the quantitative data that you're looking for, which I include in a slide as well, but I use Amplitude. You could use Mixpanel, or even basic dashboards and tools that allow you to do email marketing or social media marketing or organic social media. You can use HubSpot, Google Analytics. It can help you spot trends early, catch performance drops, find opportunities you didn't know were there. Or your company may have funnel reports that they readily share, or that maybe finance is tracking, or marketing is tracking, or leadership is tracking. And that'll at least detail every step a user is taking, usually from awareness to conversion, and can help you pinpoint where you're losing people. And so I've gotten most of my experiment ideas from monitoring and just being curious and understanding what's happening. And then if there's a spike somewhere or something starts trending down at a certain point, maybe seasonality, like why are all our sales down in April every year? Just trends that you notice. There could be hypothesis that you build to test out. Well, what if we, because we know that sales trend down for whatever reason, offer promotions around that time? What if we increase the number of emails that we send? What if we have a special ad campaign? So it's just looking at those trends and then thinking about what might change that, what might turn it around. And like I said, all of those ideas I just had could fail, and it could be something that has nothing to do with those things. But if you don't have a root cause, then you can just start there with your ideas. So from an ad click to a landing page to a sign up form, if you're looking at the funnel stages, you can think about where you might have a hypothesis of how you might impact that particular metric. So here's how to run an experiment step by step. So one, you want to form a hypothesis. I've mentioned this several times, but I probably didn't say what a hypothesis is, but it's what you think will happen if you made the change. I personally like to use the scientific structure of a hypothesis. So if you remember in science class, you would make if-then statements about any scientific experiment. Same here. So if I reorganize the content on the landing page, then people will submit more forms on this page. We'll get more conversions. So think of it like that. So what do you think will happen? And then what do you think will be the outcome of that change? Or if you send a 10% off promo code to an email list of subscribers, then it'll increase the purchase rate or pay conversion rate by X%. And then you choose an audience. So Who are you testing this on? Sometimes you've defined this already in your hypothesis, but you can get more specific here. So in my example around the promo code, my audience is email list subscribers, the new subscribers maybe, and maybe only in France. Maybe I want to test this specifically in a specific location or region, and so because I think it'll have a better impact there. And then I would pick a channel. So I've already said email, because this is how I'm going to send the promo code, but you could pick any channel. You could run a test on the website. You could run a test on an ad. You could run a test on, again, a checkout flow. You could run a test on any surface where you might have customers or users and you're trying to impact their behavior. And then you want to set a metric. What will success look like? I say always, always, always define a primary metric. And if you're working with multiple stakeholders, because I work cross-functionally with channel owners. So I might not be the email marketer, but I have to work with an email marketer to actually run this test. So when you're working with stakeholders, you could be working with engineering, product marketing, ops. You could be one of these people as well. You want to define a primary metric together. And that's the main thing you want to improve so that you're all aligned, so that if we don't move that positively, then you all agree to go back to the drawing board. But don't forget a guardrail metric, a secondary thing you want to make sure it doesn't get worse. So if your goal is more signups, a guardrail metric might be unsubscribes. So you're sending more emails, you want someone to sign up for this specific service or product or webinar. But if it causes people to unsubscribe, you're losing the ability to continue to market to them. So that's going to be a guardrail metric, because even emails or being able to contact someone has a value that you don't want to lose for your company. And that way you're growing responsibly and not accidentally hurting another part of the funnel. And then you want to make a decision. So when the test is running, you want to run it until it will get statistical significance. And that helps you figure out if a result from your experiment is real or just by random chance, and helps you form a decision. So let's say you're testing two versions of a web page, version A and version B. If version B gets more signups, you might get excited, but what if that's just random? Or what if there is no real reason, you've split the traffic, but it could just be randomly you're getting more signups on B? Is it really better? Or is it just a random luck of the draw? So is it repeatable? If you make this change to other landing pages, will you get more signups on those? So statistical significance tells you the answer by using math to measure how likely it is that that result happened by chance. When you're working with limited resources, it's really important to be smart about the experiments that you're running, as well as when to know to cut it, because a lot of times in my experience, there are only a limited number of experiments you can run at the same time, through resourcing, through a number of things, through an audience that you want to reach. And there are just finite number of things. So when something is statistically significant, it's based off the p-value, which is a number between 0 and 1. It tells you the probability that the result you saw could have happened by random chance. So if the p-value is low, usually less than 0.05, it means that there's less than a 5% chance the result was random. So it gives you confidence that the result wasn't random, that it is likely due to your change. So that's when we say that a result is statistically significant and you can trust it more. So think of it like this. If you repeated this test 100 times, would you see the same result most of the time? If the p-value is low, then the answer is yes. This is also really helpful when you're running what is an industry term, which is MVP, the minimal viable product. So you might run a small test on a small subset of an audience, and then determine from that whether or not you're going to apply it to everyone. I've done this in client services where we might run a test for a client promo or a specific type of campaign. And if that works for them, we can scale this out to similar clients with similar products, and we don't have to continue to test it. We have confidence that this change produces this result because it's statistically significant with a low p-value. Again, we just want to be confident in our result and know that the change wasn't random. one of the other ways when you are building a test or experiment that I found helpful is once you've done this, this also helps give you the inputs that you need to do some impact sizing. So I know I speak about limited resources a lot because people are resources. So I'm not just thinking about money and paid marketing experiments, but just having people build campaigns or test the real pages. So people are resources as well. You would be smart to impact size experiments. So you have a lot of ideas. And so impact sizing is having a rough estimate of the potential upside before running the test. So for example, you might say, if this increases paid signups by 10%, that's 200 new users a month. And you can assign a dollar amount to that. If you know how much a new user is usually worth or how much they purchase, say your product is $100, then you know that 200 of them will then be, oh, we're going to get $2,000 from this, as opposed to maybe another test where the impact wouldn't be that large. This doesn't require you to be able to tell the future, however, at all. It just requires you to have a good estimate of what could be likely or what you think might happen with this change. And then you can stack rank your ideas based upon that. And you also can get stakeholder buy-in to resource that, because now you can say, to your CMO or CEO or your manager, this is a change I want to make. I've done some impact sizing. This is what I think it will net out and how it would be impactful for the business. That's not only good for your business, for the job itself, but also your personal impact and things that, again, you can use and say that this is for your own professional portfolio. This is the impact that I drove, because one, you will have everything there, all of the documentation, what you did, the idea you came up with, and then you're assigning that to real business impact. And I do see some questions here. I'm going to try to get through the rest of the content and then answer them through Q&A if you all don't mind, just so we have time for that. Okay, so I mentioned this before, but I've worked for a number of different size companies, and it's important because not all tech jobs are the same. Companies operate differently, definitely depending on their industry, but also their size. So growth marketing looks different depending on the type of business you're in and what stage it's at. When I worked at a pre-Series A startup, we were moving fast and testing everything. So there were a lot of pilots and not necessarily full A/B tests. So landing pages, headlines, like I talked about, painted door test, even pricing page copy changes, full website redesigns. Speed mattered more than polish in that environment. At a more mature startup, we were optimizing for lifetime value. So we've done the hard work of finding the product market fit, which early tests are usually about. And we focus more on retention and conversion paths for large conversion paths there. So we wanted to optimize value and then get to what the large scale companies focus on, which is the retention and conversion paths. So a more established player might experiment slower, but still it mattered because they're looking to optimize revenue at this point, retention and upsell. But I would say that more of my formal tests with a lot of stakeholders came in the mid-stage to mature company environments, and startups are really scrappy. And you're more likely to fail fast here because there's just so much to test and try to understand and try to get product market fit usually, that you're just focused on learning as fast as you can. Especially when businesses might have a 6-month run rate and they're like, we have to figure this out in 6 months or the business doesn't exist. The same goes for business models. In a software as a service business, you're often testing onboarding flows or trial conversion. If it's a marketplace, you might focus on balancing demand and supply. So you might test referral incentives and things like that. And in e-commerce, you're running experiments on maybe cart abandonment or product page layout. But growth is thinking about what are the opportunities in all of these environments. So it applies everywhere, and it just evolves as the business matures. So again, software as a service, you could do free to pay conversion rate or product usage experiments, or marketplaces balancing supply, demand, and growth, e-commerce, cart abandonment flows, upsell testing, so on and so forth. Excuse me. I did promise that I would share some tools that you could potentially use. A lot of the tools, admittedly, that I've used are enterprise level tools. So they're tools that I inherited from the company I work for. But some of these tools, like Google Analytics 4, or HubSpot do have some level of a free account that you could use if you just want to experiment with it and just learn the tool more. But most of the experimentation tools I've used have been through my employer. And so tools like Google Optimize let you run simple A/B tests. Typeform is great for collecting feedback. Hotjar shows heat maps and where people click. I've used things like Full Story, Crazy Egg also with heat mapping on site, so you kind of know where people are rage clicking or where they're mostly going on your site. So maybe that you could optimize that experience. Amplitude, I've used similar to Google Analytics 4 or GA4. But Amplitude allows you to do, so it's website behavior, but Amplitude allows you to track user flows, and it's a more enterprise level. And there are new tools being added to all of these things daily, so new features. And so there are testing features that are added on as they continue to iterate on their product. But you don't have to start with fancy tools at all. Optimizely is one I mentioned before. Braze is an email marketing tool. Optimizely is on-site testing. I did mention Full Story, which is more, they actually record users on your site, and you could actually see the flow of and capture some flows of what they're doing on your site, which is pretty cool. And of course, I won't leave out generative AI because, I mean, everyone's using that, but you can also use this to support experimentation. I use ChatGPT to help me as a thought partner, to help me just flesh out some hypotheses, or checking if things are statistically significant with data that I have. I also use Perplexity, maybe for research or just understanding what's out in the market, things like that. So you can use all of these tools, and you can start small. So a lot of these are at least GA4, HubSpot to some degree. Of course, ChatGPT have free versions that you can start with. And so for key takeaways here, to wrap up, embracing a growth mindset helps you stay curious. You can run small, scrappy tests, and that's all you really need to learn. And then from there, you can build on top of that. And remember that the data doesn't have to be perfect. If you're waiting for perfect, then you're going to miss the window. So again, it's important to remain curious, and just use the data that you have available to monitor and look for opportunities, whether that's a role or not. And a lot of the roles, it's been a culture of testing. Every role is tested. And I found that's where, in a startup environment, where we make the most impact and inroads. So I'd like you all to think about this, but I do want to have time for questions as well. But while you're thinking of questions also, I wanted to understand what's one assumption you've made in your role that you could test this week as a takeaway. And I find that this is one way to build authority with the team, but also get stakeholders behind your idea, is if there is an assumption, even if you didn't make it, maybe that you can bring into your team to say, hey, we should test this. This is how we could learn from this and start to build that culture. Just starting at you, if it's not a culture of the business that you are working in. So you can take 30 seconds to jot that down. While you're doing that, I did promise you some resources that I like to use that keeps me learning and growing. So books I recommend, I included Mindset by Carol Dweck, but one of the other two other books that I really like, and I promise I have read them, The Joy of Game Theory by Tom Siegfried. And this is not exactly about marketing, but it simplifies complex ideas about game theory into practical decision-making and strategy concepts. So it's more a book on strategy, but it's really interesting. If you've ever wondered why so many like businesses are close to each other, like gas stations or things like that, the answer's in that book. So that's a teaser. But if you've always wondered why there's an Ulta and Sephora right next to each other, or they're within the same shopping centers, this book explains that, which is really interesting. And then No Rules by Reed Hastings. So this is about Netflix and how Netflix shaped the culture of experimentation to beat out the big box rental stores at the time. And so this is a culture that they embedded in that business that helped them really be an innovator in the rental space at the time. So it tells the story of how they came to be and how they beat competitors like Blockbuster. So really interesting, a good read as well. And then ongoing learning newsletters I subscribe to, TLDR marketing, because I like snippets of information and I like to read things pretty quickly. So it's digestible, very short newsletter, text only, that gives you some updates on what's going on in the marketing space. And it also sometimes gives you new tools, new testing tools and things like that. And then Growth Unhinged, which gives you deep dives on product-led growth strategies. So these are my recommendations, and hopefully those are helpful. But I know that we have a few minutes left, so I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. So we can go ahead and open up for questions and chat, and I'll do my best to answer them.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for that awesome presentation. It was super insightful, and definitely very relevant. I'm actually doing experimentation right now at my work. I'm a software engineer, and these are really good insights. So we can start with some of the questions that were already in the chat. So the first one, how long does it usually take to run all the various tests? Is it one at a time, or are they run at the same time? And are they all monitored to see which one yields the best results?
That's a great question. So typically after we build out the experiment plan or the test design plan, part of that is doing what I call a power calculation. And so you are calculating if you want to move a certain percentage, and I'll see if there are any online that I can share as a follow-up. But usually it's a math calculation of how many impressions do we need to get. If we usually get a conversion rate of X%, so you start with a baseline metric, you can run a calculation of how many impressions or how many sends or generally impressions you need to get a stat sig result, or move it based upon the guess that you made. So if you wanted to increase it by 10%, then you do a power calculation to say, I need 10,000 impressions. I'm just throwing that number out, but because we don't have an experiment, but you would start there. And then if you know that your website only gets 500 impressions a day, that kind of gives you an idea, and you're splitting that in half. That gives you an idea of, oh, I need to run this for at least, we're going to need to, each variant needs to have a certain level of impressions, and we need to run that for X amount of days. So it could be 10 days at least, but you'll have at least an idea from that power calc of how long you need to run it to get a stat sig result. Keeping in mind that when you are splitting impressions, because maybe you're doing an A/B test, that then you need to make sure you're getting impressions by variant and not just total. So your site gets 500. Now each variant, if you're running a control and a variant, they're going to get 250. And then now you need to know, you need to get 10,000 impressions for each variant. So if you're splitting that, that's going to make it take even longer. So you can run various tests depending on if it's on the same surface or not. So we can run, there are some tests that we might run on the site itself. And we can only run this one test on the site because it's on the main page. It's within the hero. The other test we want to run is on the hero. So we can't run two tests on the same placement. But yes, you can run different tests at the same time, especially if it's different audiences. You just want to be careful, because we have run into situations where maybe it's not in the same channel. So say we're running a paid ads test, and then we've changed something within the sign up flow, and they don't seem to impact each other. But there may be, if you're monitoring the data, as soon as you started that checkout flow test, you saw a dip in the performance of this paid advertising campaign or the cost per lead or things like that. So some tests do affect each other, and those are the ones you would decide just through honestly trying and failing and realizing that that is a problem, that these two types of tests can run concurrently, that you'd rerun it and make sure to keep everything else as a control. So in businesses that I've worked for, that's what we've done. We found out the hard way that we've impacted another test by running things concurrently, and sometimes you can. One way to get around that, if it is the same placement, is we've done a multivariant test. So you may run A, B, C, D, and you'll have multiple variants other than the one. The only thing to keep in mind is that usually you have to run that test longer. Like I said about the number of impressions you need to have a stat sig result, that would increase by the number of variants. So maybe now it's not a 10-day test, it's a 40-day test, but we'll have all the answers we want by the end of that test. So it really just depends on the structure. And yes, you can run tests concurrently, especially through some different tools like Optimizely. There, you can set up multiple tests.
Wow. That sounds so complicated, but wow, that's really awesome. I never thought about, it's crazy. Like, yeah, you never think about like you wanted to like run something on one place and you kind of don't realize that it impacts like another like user experience. I think that's also always really interesting to consider, like how your flows are connected in ways you don't even know.
Yeah, how we've got around some of that in the past is that if you run it in the audience is a way to really get around it. So if you want to run a test for a North America audience and then you run something else totally different for APAC, that might help with like, impacting the data or results from another test. So the audience has been the key. If there's no overlap in audience, then usually it's safe to run.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Wow. Thank you for that. That's a really good question. Awesome question. Let's take one more. We have one more in the chat. What's the difference between a good data analyst and a bad one that's not doing good at their job?
That's a great question. Also, I will say I'm not the authority on data analysts just because I'm a growth marketer, but I would say generally in any role is the willingness to learn and just going back to the nod to having a growth mindset. In my experience, any role that I've experienced teams having frustration with or not making as much impact is not having the willingness to learn. Use your colleagues, the other stakeholders. I believe that everyone's an expert in whatever they were hired to do. And how I use it, because I've managed marketing teams, large marketing teams as well, is that it's kind of like a salad and that everyone is their own ingredient, but together they make the salad. And so if you're a data analyst who doesn't see the value in like, the lettuce or the tomato and you're the only one and you're the only opinion, then I think that would make you bad at your role. I think any data analyst who is curious and willing to learn, I think data analytics, marketing, I think most roles in tech, there's always something, there are new tools, there's new things to learn. There are problems that haven't been solved yet. So just not having the willingness to learn and be accountable for one, failure, but also the failing fast and being okay with that, having that growth mindset.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's really important, having growth mindset in any role you're in. Like that's really important. It helps a team grow.
100%.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you guys for the awesome questions. Thank you, Lendora, for the great answers and the wonderful presentation. We are at time, so we'll wrap it up here today. But thank you everyone for joining. And if you're joining in the future sometime, watching this on like replay, I hope you enjoyed and learned some great things. But yeah, thank you so much. We'll end it here.
Thanks, everyone.
See ya. Bye, guys.